Hello, John Bloodworth, Gentleman Crafter here with part 28 of Fun with Foundation paper piecing. This time we're going to make Cluckabella the chicken. Now, basically there are three sections to this block. So we've got the one that goes across the top, it's just a single piece. We've got the one that goes down the side, and then the one that makes up the bulk of Cluckabella. So we're going to tackle those one by one, starting with the easiest. That's where we love to start. Easy, right? Now, this one, there's nothing to actually join to it. So what I'm actually going to do is basically just stitch within the seam allowance to fix that in place. I am also going to use a bit of glue to stick that down. It's just a temporary fabric glue. And I'm going to use that to hold it in place while I do the stitching. So like I said, I'm just going to stitch a couple of lines either side within the seam allowance, not along the dotted lines. I've told you throughout all 27 videos that came before this to always stitch on the dashed line. This time around though, just stitching within the seam allowance. We're still using that short stitch spacing, and we're still tack stitching or reverse stitching at the start and end. If you wanted, you could stitch all the way around, but I just thought a couple of lines will be enough to secure that in place. And the reason for this is just purely for holding it in place, nothing else. We'll obviously be stitching this piece to the main body of the block later on. We've actually got three chickens, three or four. Unfortunately, a fox got one of them. There were five. I think there's still, oh yeah, four. There's two big ones, two little ones. So this might actually make it into a little coaster for me. Or I could do a big quilt to keep them all warm in their hutch. Hutch? Is that where chickens live? I haven't got a clue. They're not actually my chickens, they just roam the garden, they're the neighbours. They do a lot of poo, by the way. If you're ever thinking of getting chickens, you've no idea how much chickens poo. Anyway, on that lovely note, let's move on to the second section. We've got a couple of small bits here, so we're just going to be very careful about positioning and stitching. The first one is here. And this is going to go onto space B1. Again, just a tiny little bit of glue to stick this first piece in place. And remember, whenever we do the first piece, we always put it right side facing up. The next piece that goes on top will be right side facing down. And that's the tiny little piece that's going to form the beak. Now the amount that you'll actually see of this fabric is a lot less than you actually cut, as you can see by the template itself, but that's good because it gives us things to grab onto and pin in place and stitch along. So we're stitching along the line that separates those two pieces. It's a very, very short line, but still make sure you're using short stitch spacing, that you are tack stitching at the start and the finish, and that you're stitching on the dashed line. Always trim the threads as you're working, as that helps you stay tidy, especially when you're working with such small bits. So we can unpin that, fold it back and press in place. You can use a finger presser, but on this occasion I am still using my big gigantic house iron, and you'll probably see how tiny that bit of fabric is when we come to press it. Didn't need much of the iron, and I needed to watch out for my fingers, but pressing it in place really does help. We're now going to trim any excess fabric by positioning that card along the dashed line that separates these two pieces from the main big piece, using the add a quarter ruler and a rotary trimmer. There's not much, but having that nice, clean, crisp line to position the next piece against really does help. Now the next piece is just this big whacking great thing that's going to cover the rest of the pattern. But remember, we're placing it face down, so a lot of it will extend beyond the actual piece of paper, foundation paper. And we're going to pin that in place, and again stitch along the line that separates those two sections. If you've been playing along with any of these foundation paper piecing videos, please remember I do have a Facebook group that you can come and share your creations on. The links to that are on the blog post that accompanies this video, and of course in the description below the video on YouTube. If you're finding any of these videos useful, please remember I use my spare time and whatever to create them, and obviously supplies, so any coffees via the link in the description below the video would be helpful. And of course, likes and subscriptions to the channel would be also very much appreciated. Likes because they help the video get seen by other people that also like foundation paper piecing, and the subscriptions just purely for your benefit, so you can get notified whenever I upload new videos. I do a whole lot more other than sewing, so if you fancy having a look, do check out the channel. Now, to stop this piece flapping around and all that, I am just literally again going to stitch within the seam allowance just to secure that piece in place at the end. It's not strictly necessary, I'm just doing it for my own personal whatever. Okay, so that's the next section done. Again, we will trim back to the solid outline, just so everything is neat before we move on to the final piece. And while I do that, let me ask you a question. What would you like to see from this series next year? I know we're only just over halfway through this year's series, but I like to plan ahead. Would you be interested in getting the templates or the pieces in SVG format for cutting machines like Cricut, Silhouette and Scan and Cut? Would you be interested in requesting specific designs? What would you fancy? Okay, onto the third and final piece. We've got some random size pieces going on here, and there's no definite repeating pattern like we normally get, so we need to pay careful attention about where and how we're stitching these pieces in place. So the first one again goes right side facing up, and again I'm going to use some temporary glue just to hold that in place. And I've given you a dotted outline rather than a dashed outline to help you position that first piece. Then we grab the second piece and we're going to put that right side facing down, and against the raw edge of the first piece. Again, you can see how it lines up with the edges of the previous piece. Pin it and stitch it on the line that separates those two sections. Again, it's important here to make sure to stitch only on the line that separates those two sections, not beyond it and not either side of it, on it. On it like a car bonnet, as they used to say in Newcastle. Or at least they did on that Geordie Shore show. Is that still going? I don't know. I don't really watch much telly these days. I have the odd movie every now and again of an evening, but I can't say I've followed a series of any kind for a long time. Oh, actually, that's a bit of a fib. Obviously Doctor Who, but who doesn't? Probably everybody that's watching this video. Lots of developments in Doctor Who this year. 60th anniversary as well coming up. 60 years for a TV show. I mean, sure they had a 13-year break, but it started 60 years ago. David Tennant is coming back for that one. And then there's a brand new Doctor coming up later this year, I think. I'm not sure why this video has descended into one of those videos where I just geek out, but I do enjoy a bit of Doctor Who. I think actually I have, in fact I know I have because I watched a few recently on BritBox. I have literally now watched every single episode. Can you believe that? And I haven't even been alive for 60 years. Thank heavens for streaming. Okay, next up, a bit of the actual chicken. Some chicken bits. Ooh, fancy chicken nuggets for my tea. Anyway, so again we're positioning that right side facing down. I have actually descended into just random waffle. Sorry. I don't know why I've done that, but hopefully you're getting the idea of what I'm doing. Again, stitching along the line that separates the pieces that we've got going on there. I'm not really sure I can give you any more tips on that. Trim the threads, stay tidy, and fold back and press. And this forms Cluckabella's tail feathers. Excuse me. There we go, nice and pressed. Now for this piece which forms her neck and head. And it's only got a slight offcut at the top. So trying to make sure this goes in at the right angle was a bit of a challenge. I had to fold it back, as you see there, just to make sure that I was getting it right. But hopefully you can see how the raw edge is the same length and that the bottom pieces match up. Might look like it's on at a weird angle, but trust me, it's right. Again, stitching along the line that separates those two parts. I've stopped shouting out numbers because I'm just conscious that it will just be so much information to take in. If you think they're useful, let me know and I'll go back to doing that. I think throughout all these videos I've been asking you what you do want to see. So let me ask you this. Is there anything you don't want to see? Do you not want to see any more log cabin things? Do you not want to see any more geometrics? Do you not want to see any more animals? Let me know. All feedback is good, as long as there's no swear words. Okay, there's the tail feathers and the neck. Now for the body. And that's this big old piece here. Nice and easy to position and to stitch. We'll just make sure to pin it in place though. Are you already thinking of what colours your chicken will be? Are you going to do a big white chicken with a orange beak and then a dark background, or are you going to switch it up? After trimming the threads, I am, as you will probably have guessed by now, going to fold that back and press it in place. Do you know, when I was selecting this fabric, I had no idea. Are they feathers or are they leaves? Interesting. Subconscious. Now I'm using a bit of card to fold back, as I've done throughout this video, and just to trim back any excess thread or fibres. I think I'm doing fine on that one. This one I might get a little bit. And it's just again so that I've got a nice neat edge to place the next pieces against, and that they are exactly 1/4 inch. Because that's how the templates have been worked out. So if they're beyond that, your templated pieces might not fit. And these are much easier to position because they've got those angled ends which help you position it correctly. Now, because they're such small pieces, I can actually pin both in place together so that I can be a bit speedier and not have to stop and press and stop and press and so on. So I can now stitch both lines. I will of course trim threads in between. And we're almost done. That'll be our 3 sections created. We'll then need to put them together. So like I said, just trimming the threads and then going straight back in to stitch the next piece. Really got me thinking about chicken nuggets now. I think I am actually going to have to go to the shop after this and get some. Might have to get some dipping sauce as well. Maybe some sweet chili. Okay, so stop thinking about food, John, and get back to this. So I'm pressing back and then pressing down. The iron. So there's the chicken body all put together. I will trim back to the solid edge again so that I've got a neat bit to work with next. A neat bit to work with? What does that even mean? A nicely trimmed block. Let's use that. I'm not even sure why I've used double cutting mats today. Normally I use one or the other. How very strange. Okay, so this is how we're going to form our block. Those 2 pieces together and then that one on top. So first up, let's put the chicken together. Some kind of Frankenstein thing going on there. Pin the piece in place, and then we're going to sew along the dashed line up against that left hand edge. Although I have turned it and it's now the right hand edge. You know which bit I mean, right? With these, I am just going from start to finish. I'm not necessarily going too far beyond, but you can if you want to. Unpin, and then I'm going to work from the back first and just use my finger presser to try and help spread that seam out flat so that I have the relevant bits on either side. And I'm not creating too much excess bulk. And then I'm going to try and secure that in place using the iron. Again, just careful of your fingers. Can't tell you how many times I've burnt myself over the years. I'm genuinely surprised I've got any fingerprints left. Okay, and then pressing. Plop. And then the final stage, obviously, is to join the top section on. So again, we're placing that along the raw edge, pinning it in place. And because it's so narrow, I'm probably going to pin up as opposed to across. And then we're going to use the top dashed line, or the one that's currently on the left, to stitch against. That one. This would make a fun cushion cover, I think, for a farmhouse kitchen maybe, or a pot holder, or even just a wall hanging. You could have your background the same colour and then just all sorts of different coloured chickens, couldn't you? I wonder what the automatic captioning software will make of my waffle today. Anyway, again, just working from the back and using the finger presser, I started to try and separate this out, but what I found was there was quite a bit of bulk where the seams met in the middle. And then I decided, because of that, and because it's not going to cause too much issue, I decided to actually press the whole thing just to one side. Like that. I couldn't be bothered to fiddle, so I just went with the whatever approach. If you find that but you still want to press the seams open, just get some fine snips and snip away some of the bulk within the seam allowance. That will help. And there we go, there's little old Cluckabella clucking away and laying some eggs. Hope you've enjoyed this one. Please remember to give it a thumbs up. In the meantime, thanks for watching.